Hello everyone and welcome to the Northeast Georgia History Center. My name is Marie Walker and I am the Ada Mae Ivester Education Center Director here. And today I'm going to show you how do you get dressed in the 1880s. Hello everyone and welcome to the Northeast.
Sorry.
We're having technical difficulties.
Alright, we're good.
Are we good now?
Yeah, we're good.
I can see talking. Okay. Today I'm going to show you how to get dressed in the 1880s. Several months ago, I showed you how to get dressed in the 1860s, and you might notice that there are some similarities, but there are also some major differences. So right here, we're going to start with what I am currently wearing. So I'm currently wearing a chemise and pantalettes, pair of drawers, and that is what you start out with. That is your foundational layers. We will then pile on more as we go on. This is what you're going to start off with. This style of chemise is a little bit different than the one that I was wearing in the 1860s. The one in the 1860s had more of a cut off the shoulder, and that's because for evening dresses and such of that time period, it was going to be very much off the shoulder. It's very much about the width of the shoulder. Here we're going back to height. Instead of width, we have height, and that's kind of the main idea for the 1880s, is that you have a lot of, well, height. And that's shown in clothing, it's shown in the hair, and that is the main focal point. So you have chemises like this, you have chemises that are still off the shoulder because for evening dresses and such, you do still have the off the shoulder necklines, and of course the pantalettes. Also in this era, you start seeing the first things that are called combinations. I am now old-fashioned wearing a chemise and drawers, while people still absolutely did it. Not everyone adapts to the new trend or fad the moment that it comes out, and I always try to remind people of that. Is when did you get your first smartphone? Was that the day that it came out? No, we adapt over time. So as long as you're wearing something that was popular right before that, I still think that it's historically acceptable and correct for someone. I'm just I like my chemise and my drawers, and I'm not willing to change yet. But it is interesting that these things called combinations have started to appear in the Bustle era, and you'll see why it's called the Bustle era in a moment. Combinations though, even though I'm not wearing it, is basically just a chemise sewn to your pantalettes. So instead of having them both different here, it's basically there would be a seam right here, and all of this fabric would just go away. So it would look basically like this without all of this fabric, and that would be what a combination looks like. And it would be one piece that you would put on. Those are then popular from the 1870s, 1880s-ish to into the 1900s, into the Edwardian era. So that is a little bit about the underpinnings that I am currently wearing. The next thing that we're going to do, notice that I'm saying support structures, I'm saying underpinnings, foundations, and these are the foundational layers in which the dress is built upon. The dress is really an architectural structure, especially in the 1860s and the 1880s. You have to build it. You have to have a good foundation to build it off of. So we have this, of course. This is going to be used, it's going to be closest to my skin. It's going to protect my skin. It's also going to protect the dress because people sweat. People have sweated for as long as people have been people. So we don't want the dress to get all sweaty because then we have to wash the dress, and it's much easier to wash these very plain, not fancy fabrics than to wash the very delicate, very fine fabrics that are made out of the outer dress. But first things first, well, actually we're going to put on our shoes and our socks before that, because boots before corset is usually the rule. I sometimes, where did I put my shoes? Oh, I found them. They were hiding. So here I have my stockings. Now these are my stockings that I use when I do my 1700s clothing and reenactment. And I have chosen them specifically for 1880s, even though you would be like, why? It's 100 years out of fashion. Well, it's because I wanted to talk to you about how the 1770s play a major role in the fashion of the 1870s and the 1880s. It is now 100 years since America has become a nation. And for anyone who is living at the bicentennial of the 200-year anniversary, you know how big of a deal that was. It was also a huge deal when America reached 100 years old, especially right after having a civil war where we almost didn't make it. So the 1770s came back into fashion. People were having that Revolutionary Era spirit. You'll see engagements on dresses like the lace ruffles around the sleeves come back shorter. It's different. It's definitely its own distinct fashion, but it's highly influenced by the 1770s. In the 1870s and going into the 1880s, you still have a carryover from that. And for that reason, I have my clocked stocking that I wear. People would still wear, indeed, stockings like this. Clock stockings, questionable if they would have worn those. Depends on how your revolutionary spirit is. And I'm not sure if they were actually making clock stockings at the time. But I use them as a deliberate talking point for you today to talk about how American fashion re-inspired Americans a century later. But a lady would definitely wear her stockings with her boots and her garters. All right, so we're going to put on the stockings. And then I just have a pair of black boots that lace up the front. Very common, very just practical daily use boots. These are not necessarily fancy boots. These are more my working boots, but they are what I have. If you are a very fancy lady, which one day I strive to be, you'll have boots that have little buttons up the side and are quite fine. And you have to have a whole little tool just to hook the buttons on your shoe. It's called a button hook. One day I will have shoes like that to show you. And we'll have to do a whole nother one of these and it'll be great. But until then, I just lace up my shoes like a peasant girl. All right. It's not too interesting. I lace up my shoes just like we lace up our shoes today. There's nothing incredibly spectacular about that. People have been lacing up boots for a while. All right. Now I will put on my corset. So sometimes people say boots before corset because corsets do limit your mobility ever so slightly, even though I have never had a problem putting on my shoes while in a corset. But that does seem to be the proper way of putting things on. So for demonstration purposes, we will do that. So this is a corset. This is really a costume corset, but it's very similar to the shape of a 1770s, 1780s corset. If you remember from our last one, or perhaps if you go and watch the last one that we did right after this one, you will see the corset from the 1860s. It is lower cut. It is a little bit of a different shape. It has far more of a indentation here, and the cup is lower. It comes to about here. This one in the 1770s, 1780s, the cup line rises to cover more of the actual breast. And that is the thing. This one's a very fancy corset. Sometimes corsets could be quite fancy. My other one is extremely plain compared to this one. This one's a pink brocade with lace trim. And yes, corsets did and could get quite fancy. They weren't necessarily always just plain utility garments. Of course, it depends on how fine a lady you are, how much money you have to make your underwear pretty, because no one really is going to see this except you and whoever you decide to share your underwear with. So that is where we are. It laces up the back. I have a nice pink ribbon that laces it up the back. I think it's all laced to the top. I should make it a little tighter. There we go. Aha, found it. All right. There we go. A little more supported now. So next we have what gives the era its name almost, the bustle era. This is a bustle. Now this is a distinct type of bustle. There are many types of bustle throughout the bustle era. In the 1870s, you have a natural bustle, which literally just means your butt. It's a natural form. It's one of the first times in a while where we have a more natural silhouette that is not incredibly enhanced with shapewear like this. So in the 1870s, it's a very flat bustle, but you have a lot of fabric that is motioned and carried to the back. 1860s, we have the big hoop skirt. Hoop skirt goes out of fashion. People don't want to just totally get rid of their dresses though, so you see a change where people could literally just drop their hoops. They still have a bunch of fabric, and then what do you do with that fabric? You just kind of take it and tie it up in the back. That's kind of what happens. And then once you take that fabric and you tie it up in the back in the next decade, you start to get bigger and bigger bustles. Sometimes they're more like cage bustles, which look very similar to the 1860s. Big hoop skirt, except for that it's concentrated in the back, and the front is not as poofy in the front. You want it to carry out slightly in the front, but you don't want a big hoop. You want it to be flatter and have the majority of that poofage in the back. You also have bustles that are smaller, that just come up around the waist almost, and it reminds me a lot of the 1700s with the false rumps, which we'll have to do another video on that. That'll be fun. But it's just a cushion basically that goes right over your behind, and that gives a little oomph to the fabric. And then you have I consider this to be a fairly popular design of bustle in the 1880s, early to mid 1880s, and that is called the lobster tail bustle, because it looks like a lobster tail, doesn't it? I'm a lobster now. So it's a lobster tail bustle. It does, again, of course, you have the lobster tail, but then you also have your side panels that help smooth out the skirt and smooth out the lines, and then it ties. I have in the front. I had mine made out of lavender because just one of my favorite colors. And they could come in a variety of colors and fabrics. No one sees it, so it doesn't really matter what color it is. It is not going to show through to your outer skirt, and you'll see why in just a few moments. But it's very fun. A lot of times people ask me, how do you sit in a bustle? So let's demonstrate. Well, you can still see the actual bustle. So I find my chair, right? I can feel the chair on the back of my legs because it's the bustle's still over it. So you just kind of back up until you feel the chair at the back of your legs. I hit it with my heel, and then you just sit. It's collapsible. See? It's like an accordion. I'm having too much fun with this. All right. So there you are. It's just a nice lobster bustle. It is collapsible. It moves with me, and it doesn't, usually you don't have the tragedy of it moving too far because you have these two nice side panels that are going to pretty much stick to they're not like sticky in a sense, but it is going to hold this here. It's going to help the lobster tail hold its shape. And this is just boning, just normal boning that you could get out of a store. And of course then you have a ruffle at the end because you want to kind of help that transition. You don't want it to just cut off right after the last rung, so that ruffle there is to help smooth out that transition. Okay, so like I said, you don't have to worry about seeing the bustle, and you want to hide all of these rungs, these lumps, because you don't want that to show through to the outside of your dress. So what do? You have a petticoat, but not just any petticoat, a ruffled petticoat. All right, let's get that. And then here has a nice hook and eye closure that we're going to just lop on right there. It's at the side of the skirt between the front, which you can see the front is very flat. It's very, very flat. And then we just have the one ruffle at the bottom, helps smooth out the transition, gives it a little fullness at the bottom of the skirt. And then we got all the ruffles. Got all the ruffles in the back that are going to hide. The bustle is going to kind of also fill out the sides a little bit, so we don't have just as stark of a boom boom situation going on. Except for that was really popular in the later 1880s. When you have the transition from the natural form bustle into basically a shelf that is on the back of your dress, this is kind of an in-between where we have it's a little more rounded. We still have a fairly decent shelf situation going on, but it's also a little more rounded. This petticoat helps that silhouette get that rounded shape going on there. That's popular in the more early to mid 1880s, but then it also very much shifts by the late 1880s, if you're following the high fashion of the day, to a literal huge shelf on the back of your bustle, on the back of your dress. I prefer, personally, the more soft round silhouette that is not completely a shelf but still has the nice poofage in the back. So here we are so far. You can very much see the silhouette taking shape. Move my hair so that you can get a good idea of where the bustle is doing and all that. So here we have just the bed sheet. It is a 5 ruffled bed sheet, 5 ruffled petticoat that I made out of bed sheets. So it's fun. They're cotton bed sheets. This is my newest creation that I am sharing with you today of how to get dressed. All right. So once we have the petticoat on, we're then going to go to the underskirt. So the underskirt goes over the petticoat, but it's going to be seen by people. At least the front is. You can tell the front is because it has where all the colorful ruffles are. The back, not so much. We are going to save fabric. We're not going to put ruffles on the back because it's not going to be seen. We're going to save money and just have it be plain. So here we are, we have the waistband for the underskirt. It has a little bit of darts sewn into the top. That gives it its shape, because you don't want to have to gather it a lot, especially in the front where you're trying to have everything be rather smooth. In the back though, it is gathered because the back, we're trying to get poof in the back anyway, so that's fine. So I'm gonna put this one on next. All right. There we are. I think it went down. Oh, I hung up a little bit. All right, there we go. Sometimes you just have to jump to get everything right into its place. All right, so you can see a little bit in the back where you can see like where the ruffles are, but they're not going to be shown, because in just a moment you'll see what happens next. But so you can see it's taking shape even more. We have these lovely ruffles on the bottom of the skirt. So we have purple, emerald, sapphire, ruby, and a turpoline, so it's like more of a dark bluish green. And of course, my petticoat, which we're going to hide. Don't want the petticoats to show. All right, so there we are, smoothing all those out. I want to make sure that my ruffles are evenly distributed to each side, and that I have this on where it is indeed in the front, because we're about to put on another skirt. So the next layer that we have coming on today, this is the overskirt, or sometimes referred to more as the apron. Here, let me grab my safety pin off of this skirt. So here we can see, here is the front, here is the back, and it closes at the side, very much similar to my petticoat and my underskirt. It closes at the side. So this is, you'll be able to see it a little bit better once I put it on myself, but the front, it is pleated. I'm going to show you the pleats right up front here. It's pleated going up. So it's pleated, the fabric has been taken and then pleated going up, so then it will hang and drape nicely across the front. So that smoothness that we liked in the front is going away with the gathered fabric in the top. And then we're going to have even more gathered fabric in the back. We also have some very nice embroidery on this skirt. So here we have some embroidered flowers on the side and also along the front of the skirt. So embroidery at this time period, lace, frills, the more the merrier. Whatever as I read this pattern when making this dress, it said put decorative things anywhere you want. There's no particular one side or one place where you should put them or not put them. People loved decoration, and this is very much going back to a remembrance of the 1700s, the Marie Antoinette era, that mid-Rococo period where there was lace and frills, and the more trim, the better on your dress. So it was a harkening back to that as well. In 1700s fashion, as I was saying, that was very popular, harkening back to that during this time period. In the harkening back to the 1780s, mid to late 1700s, in the mid to late 1800s. All right. I'm gonna make sure this all comes down there. Of course, a lady also might have a maid who comes and helps her. I always like to make sure that I have alternating closures, so the bolt doesn't end up just completely built out onto one side. So the closures on the petticoat and the underskirt close on this side, and then the closure for the skirt closes on this side, as soon as I get it all draped as it's supposed to. Let's step back and see. All right. There we are. So now you can see a little bit better how that draping is happening across the front of the dress here. I call it almost like an apron skirt because it kind of feels like a very fancy decorative apron. But this is extremely popular throughout the mid to early 1700s. I've got something going on here. Ooh. All right. All right, there we are. I think it's that smoothed it out a little bit. All right, are we smooth on this side? Okay, we're smooth enough on that side. That's pretty good. All right, so now you can see how it is on the front here. The lace does come down and cover some of the ruffles, but that's okay. You don't want that white petticoat or the white underskirt part of the skirt to show. And the color is going to show through the lace anyway. So I have the lace at the bottom with the embroidery, and then going up to the top here we have the more interesting fabric draped across, and then in the back it just goes straight down. All right, this is almost done. There we are. All right, so then in the back it's gathered and it just kind of goes down. It's a waterfall back. And then I also have the side pieces right here that connect the back part to the front gathered part, and that part has some embroidery on it as well. So there we are. So next thing is the bodice. That fell off. So here's the bodice. Has a two-piece coat sleeve. You can tell they're a two-piece coat sleeve because you have a seam on either side. And it's a coat sleeve, not because it's a jacket necessarily, but that's just what they're called. I have embroidery on the cuffs of the sleeve. There's embroidery on the back, and then there's also embroidery on the front, which I will show you a little bit more in a little bit once I get it put on. So here we are. So it's very much just like a jacket that fits over the top. I do have it boned along this first pleat here. It could be boned more, but I just chose to just bone it that one piece. And then it has hook and eyes that go down the front. And what's interesting thing is this is where my natural waistline has ended. But this jacket still goes down almost to the end of my torso. The end of my torso also has this attached to it. So I have to make sure, especially when sewing this, is that it was not just large enough for me. I had to take measurements over the bustle, the skirt, the underskirt, the petticoat, the chemise, and the panelettes, which add a little bit more girth to myself. And you have to calculate for that because you want it to be fitted, but you also want it to fit. All right, there we are. We'll make sure that lays down nicely. Goes into that nice little overlap thing. All right, so my chemise is showing a little bit. Need to push that down. There we are. All right, push that down a little bit more again. It has a drawstring here, so I can undo it and make it wider or tighter depending on what I need for the dress. So it is adjustable. All right, so this is a little bit more of a fancy dress. One might not wear such a neckline out just anywhere. This is more of a fancy dress, but still a more of a day dress than a dinner dress or a ball gown. Actually, I feel like this could be worn to a rather nice dinner. Oh, it's still not wanting to stay down. All right, there we go. This could be worn to a nicer dinner, especially a dinner that is earlier in the evening where you're sure dancing is not going to be happening afterwards as well. Or out for a walk, you would also put on like a tucker, a chemisette, a kerchief, if you were considered, if you were worried about modesty or sun. But that I would consider this dress to be like a very fancy day dress, basically. So here we are. You can see the shape of the bodice now. So it has, of course, the sleeves. I always liked standing to the side the best as a profile because I think this is one of the best profiles that we get in a fashion era. In the 1860s, you look about the same standing this way or this way, but this way you get the whole of the bustle. I will move my hair. I'm about to do my hair. And then it'll be up and out of the way. But I want you to see how, so here's then my natural waistline. And then it comes out kind of like with little tails here, so that it fits nicely over the bustle and it sits there. So you can see that. And then it comes down, has a little bit, you want it to be a little fitted, and then it has to come out over the bustle because we also have the side gathers here, as well as, of course, all the other layers that are down under it. And it has the two darts here. It is lined, very much similar to just the petticoat lining and such. But this one is also interesting because it has an interlining as well, which means that there is a lining that has been flat laid, which means just sewn to, so they're sticking, basically they're the same piece of fabric between the outer fabric. And this is a light grayish wool. And then the lining, I used a cotton that was also once had a life as a bed sheet. So there's the interlining that attaches itself to the fashion fabric, and then there's the lining, which is sewn to the fabric that you actually see. You don't see the interlining anymore. It's literally a lining between the outer fabric and the inner fabric, which is how they would have made dresses at that time. For the embroidery, I chose lots of places to put the embroidery on the jacket as well. So of course there's the embroidery around the neckline. There is the embroidery at the cuffs. And also there is embroidery on the back of the dress. Not to mention as well as the bottom of the skirt and the side of the skirt. So to now see that embroidery on the back, I'm going to now do my hair in an 1880s hairstyle. So I part my hair in the middle. They were very much middle part people. And then I'm going to do a daytime hairstyle. So like I said, it was about height. Let's see. So we're going to go high. I'm going to start out basically doing a high ponytail. All right, and then I'm going to braid it. Just a simple 3-strand braid. Whee, okay, I have a lot of hair. I'll step back so as I braid my hair up, you'll be able to see it. All right, we have now made it to the top of the braid. I'm going to get one of my hair ties. I am using a modern rubber hair tie. They may have used string. They did have elastic back then, but it was not as reliable as our elastic is today. So they would not use it for keeping up a skirt or keeping on a blouse or anything like that. It would be used for little things, very small things, short occurrences. All right, so now that I have braided up my hair, I am going to basically make myself a little hair crown in a bun. So I want it to sit very close to the front of my head, right here, like the crown of my head. I want my hair to be very much there, so you can see its height. I'm going to hide the tail of my hair here under. And then I'm going to use some hairpins here. These are just normal hairpins, bobby pins, which are not exactly historically accurate. They had bobby pins, but they looked slightly different than this in the mid-Victorian era. The ones that they had would be more closely related to the giant plastic ones that we have that looks very similar to this, but they're a little bit bigger. All right, and then I'm just going to stick several bobby pins in. My hair, just going around at the base of the crown so that it holds in place. All right, we're doing pretty good. This side's a little more lopsided. We need this more this way. All right, we'll stick one more in here for good measure, and also to try to even out this bump that has been created. There we go. Actually, one more in the back. I feel insecure with my hair like that. Felt like it was going to come down. Don't want that. All right. So for the most part, there we go. I now have all my hair up. Very tall, adding to the height. we're gonna smooth my dress back down after reaching up to my hair. So now you can definitely see the back embroidery of my dress, as well as the ones in the front. All right, so I'll do a slow turn so now you can see the whole look. I'm going to back up also a little bit so now you can actually see the whole look with the bottom ruffled layers and everything. So this skirt, you can see there it is, how close it is to showing that white underskirt part. All right, do one more for the bottom of the skirt. All right, so do we have any questions for me?
We do.
Oh, wonderful.
Kay is wondering about, with all of those layers, does it get hot?
A little bit. Sometimes these are fabrics that breathe pretty well. So it can get hot. Right now I am a perfectly normal temperature. I feel very fine, in case anyone was wondering. If you do go out and you stand in the sun, yes, you will get hot, but you'll get hot going out and standing in the sun with whatever you're wearing these days. So these fabrics, they breathe a little bit more. They also have, they have a give to them and a poof and air circulation that can come up and go in there. You can create your own little breeze just by kind of swaying back and forth, even though it's also sometimes considered bad to do that, impolite or not good etiquette.
Anne is wondering, how heavy do you think all of those layers combined are?
Yes, so dresses can get really heavy, especially when you have a lot of embroidery, when you have a lot of beading, and that is why these structural layers, the foundation layers, are so important. I have seen girls with modern skirts that are huge skirts, and they're not wearing support garments. They're not wearing a corset. They're not wearing, basically they're not wearing a corset. So they put on a giant hoop skirt and it digs into their side because it's such a heavy dress and they don't have anything to support it other than the hoop. The hoop needs something to support it. The corset, not only does it keep our bosom friends happy and uplifted and secure, but it also distributes the weight of the dress. The corset is going to distribute the weight of the dress. I do not feel, I feel a little back heavy, but that's just because I'm not used to wearing all of this bustle situation going on. So I can feel where it is, but it's not digging into me at all. I feel very fine, even though I do have a lot of weight on the back of my dress. And it's heavy. It can get quite heavy, especially with all of these layers. 5 to 10 pounds. I feel like this dress is not that heavy. It's a very light wool. It's a very nice light wool, but I do have an inner lining as well as the lining attached to it, so it is a little bit more hefty. And then the petticoat, the ruffled petticoat, is actually quite heavy with all of those ruffled layers. And the underskirt here is not that heavy. It's a very light satin. The lace is not that heavy. So this dress, I might say 5-7 pounds at most. It would be interesting if I went and weighed it. But that's with everything, with the chemise, the panelets, the corset, the bustle, the petticoat, the underskirt, the overskirt, and the top.
All right. Anne is also curious to know, what would the average woman wear at home, just hanging out at home?
That's a very good question. So this is probably not I'm going to go read a book in the library, have a normal, nice brunch Sunday dress. This is I am going to go outside and people are going to see me and I want to look good dress. What you might wear at your own home, it still might be more frilly than the sweats and t-shirts that we have today, but it's going to be less structured. So sometimes a lady lounging around her house, she would have what you would call a tea gown. And a tea gown, it's very similar in the style to this, but it does not have as many ruffles, and it's not as structured. And also it might not have a bustle. It would just be a kind of a very elegant bathrobe that would be acceptable to be worn around your house, maybe even receive close friends with. But you probably you don't want to necessarily, some ladies might, if it's a very fancy tea gown and they feel fine wearing that out in public, one might. But that is definitely something that a lady is going to wear just relaxing in her home because it's not as structured of a garment.
Kay is wondering, did women usually make their own dresses, particularly this style?
That's a very good question. It depends on how much money you have and how much time you have. So I made this dress, but a lady who would have had this dress back in the 1880s would probably not have made it herself. She would have had someone make it for her. She probably would have had a seamstress to do it, especially with the amount of detail that you have with the ruffles and the embroidery. And that's going to take a really long time to do all of that and to make this. And a lady, I would say this is a upper middle class dress. They're probably going to have someone make it for them. I would bet. If you are a lower class lady, if you are not as well off financially, and perhaps you have the skills, you might make something that is this splendid. But you're probably going to be probably be making your own work dresses that you are going to go outside and actually work in. This is not a work dress by any means of the imagination. You're not going to wear a giant bustle when you have a work dress. If you think back to Little House on the Prairies, that's set about the same time period, people who are going out and working in the fields are not going to wear a bustle. They're going to wear a work dress, which might mean they might have a petticoat on, and a corded petticoat, and that's for practical reasons like keeping warm and making sure your dress is held out a little bit so it doesn't get all bunched up when you're trying to work and walk and move when you're, on a farm or in a factory. Versus this, which would be highly, highly, highly impractical to do anything but to go about and be social and be seen and be like, look at me, I am pretty, I have money, I'm going to go walk around town, I'm going to go visit with my friends, I'm going to have a good time and be sociable, but I'm not going to do any hard physical labor. So I would say that definitely if you're middle class is always a flip of the coin of, especially middle class and lower middle class in this social economic time, may have made their own clothes, may have bought their clothes. We are also at the beginning of the second industrial revolution, which is when we start to see off the rack clothes that are pre-made. Up until this time, clothes have been tailor-made for you, or you have made your own clothes for your own body and your own family. We are now starting to see clothes that you can just go and buy off the rack in a department store. Very, very new, so only rich people are going to do that still, but eventually it will trickle down into the rest of society. So I hope that answers your question.
Susan is wondering, would the same seamstress who made the dress also hand embroider, or was that a specialty job?
Very good question. So I think that really depends on the dressmaker and their skills. I use machine embroidery to do this, which they would not have had at that time, but they did enjoy the floral designs, very similar to the ones I chose here. I'm going to get a little closer so you can see a little better what we have going on here. So that might be the seamstress. She might also have the skills to embroider. You might also have a specialty job. So that very much depends upon the skill set that company has.
What comes after the bustle era? When does the bustle era end and what comes next?
Yeah, so the bustle era does not last for that long. So like I said, in the 1870s, you have the natural bustle. In the 1880s, we have a lobster bustle. Then we have like that shelf bustle, which the lobster bustle is not a shelf bustle. The lobster bustle is a more gradual shift downwards versus just having a shelf sitting there. So that only really lasts for the 1880s. It only lasts for about a decade, is these bustles and contraptions. And it's a variety of bustles as well. It's not just the lobster bustle or just this one. It's a lot of change and a lot of different styles that we see just in the 1880s themselves. And then we go to the 1890s. It is Gilded Age. Second Industrial Revolution is in full swing. We have people who are making millions who hadn't really had that kind of money before. You have a lot of wealth. You have the Vanderbilts, and you have the Gilded Age. And of course, the fashion is going to reflect that wealth for the wealthy. The bustles disappear, and we go back to just having a nice full skirt, but you don't have any skirt supports from this time forward. This is the last great hurrah of a skirt supporter. And then we really go back to just kind of having maybe a petticoat, but it's not that much emphasis on the skirt. We are actually, in the 1890s, we're going to have the emphasis on the sleeves. If you thought the 80s, the 1980s had big sleeves, try the 1890s. Huge leg of mutton sleeves. They're the ones who started it. Well, actually, the 1830s started it, but that's going back a little bit farther. In the 1890s, these huge sleeves. Princess Diana would have fit right in with her wedding dress. The sleeves were that big. So we see the sleeves. The skirt kind of is not the emphasis at this point. It's the huge sleeves, which become the emphasis of the fashion silhouette. And then we move into the Edwardian.
Susan's also wondering, when did the hobble skirt or hobble dress go into fashion, and how long was that a trend?
Yeah, so the hobble skirt is a skirt that is very narrow at the bottom, so it's kind of like hobbles you, like, you know, you kind of have to like do this to walk around in it because it's very restricting. That was really popular in the 19-teens. So after the Edwardian era, going into 19-teens, when things were a little uncertain, you had the whole World War going on, that picked up steam there, especially when you have a war, you have rationing on fabric, and you're, you know, conserving fabric to go to the war effort. Hobble skirts kind of have this moment in the sun where they're this interesting fashion trend that happens. They don't stick around for that long. But they do have a little time in the early 19-teens.
What is your next project?
Oh, my next project. I was actually just thinking about that last night because I just finished this one just a couple weeks ago. I haven't started on my next big sewing project yet. I'm thinking about doing it's still historically inspired, but more of a cosplay direction with making the live action Cinderella wedding dress, which, if you look at it, has a lot of 1890s influences. The skirt straight out of the 1890s. It has a very, like I was saying, it has a very flat front on the skirt for her Cinderella's wedding dress in the live action version, and then it has a very full back and train, which honestly very much reminds me of an 1890s ball gown. And then the top, it does not have the giant sleeves like the 1890s, but it does have a very corseted top. It looks a lot like a ball gown bodice in the 1890s, except it doesn't have the big sleeves, it just has narrow sleeves.
All right, I think that's all of our questions for today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining me, and I had so much fun getting this dress on with all of you. It's just so fun. Jumping in, it's also fun, just because of the bustle and how it bounces. It's a very fun time period, and I enjoy this, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I hope you learned a little bit more about late Victorian 1880s fashion. Until next time, stay safe and take care.